Any this evening to the delegations. We do have one delegation this evening. Mr. Eric McCartney on behalf of Judy Sherman, Eva Folks, and Christine Valentini, and this is regarding the Canada 150 Mural Mosaic Project. Mr. McCartney, please let us know your name and address, and you have 5 minutes. Or is it 10 minutes? It's 5 minutes.
Yes, my name's Eric McCartney. I live at 1 Buchanan Crescent, Aurora, Ontario. Mr. Chair, councillors, staff, thank you for allowing me this time. My purpose here this evening is to help enlighten you regarding the Canada 150 Mural Mosaic Project that our Canada 150 Ad Hoc Committee has recommended to be endorsed. The Canada 150 mural participation idea came from Aurora's 2016 Arts and Culture Award winner, Christine Valentini. Unfortunately, Christine is out of the country at this time. Christine, along with Judy and Ava, asked me to speak on their behalf. Just for your info, they will not be receiving any compensation on this project. The Canada 150 Mural Mosaic is a bold undertaking of creating a mural for numerous municipalities from across Canada. Over 80,000 paintings and 150 individual murals that, when united, will form one gigantic mural mosaic. The overall mural image would be a collaboration between our Canada 150 Ad Hoc Committee, the artist named within this delegation, and the Canada 150 Mosaic Art Director. The committee will have final approval of the image. The image will be something that represents Aurora in Canada's history to connect with other communities in this legacy piece of art. Each image tile created by residents will be strategically placed within the mural to bring it to life. Our mural will stay in Aurora. It will represent a cultural mosaic, a time capsule, a visual portrayal of our history within Aurora. The mural will be a reminder of Canada's 150th anniversary. 50 years from now, this art piece may inspire other generations of Aurorans who will be able to celebrate through the mural and may even add to it. Imagine residents, children, painting one of these tiles and being able to view their work during the unveiling of the mural, during different times within their lives, and maybe with family members decades later. Think how proud a child resident would be. Our town would be responsible for stewarding 2 to 3 days of painting workshops facilitated by the Canada 150 professional artists who will travel to Aurora. This involves rallying participants and providing a venue for the paintings to take place. A number of Canadian celebrities have already painted a tile. The following Ontario communities have completed or started their mural: Oakville, Innisfil, Ajax, Barrie, Burlington, Newmarket, and others. A Barrie resident emailed Christine stating, "It was an honor to have a part in something so spectacular." Within your agenda package is a spreadsheet that shows the cost breakdown. Please note some of the in-kind estimate fees may not be required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCartney. May I have a motion, committee, to receive and refer the comments to staff? Moved by Mayor Daw. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marakis. Are there any comments or questions for the delegate? Yes. Mayor Daw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's taken a while to get used to this new system, isn't it?
It has. One day.
First of all, Eric, thank you for coming out, and I appreciate the additional information you brought that wasn't quite available, or the full information package that wasn't available when you came to the Canada 150 Committee. Eric presented to the 150 Committee a couple of weeks ago, and the committee was quite keen on it, and the direction was to refer to staff. So I appreciate the position we've taken. We have had some preliminary discussions with with our 2 staff representatives, Shelley Ware and Laura Shearden, in terms of funding and things like that. So there is some work that's already being done on that. So Eric, thank you very much, and we are looking at this very closely. Well, don't run away.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Anyone else with comments or questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. McCartney, for coming. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we'll move then, committee, to the consent agenda. Ask if there's any comments or questions on any items that are on the consent agenda at this time. Seeing none, can I have someone move the approval of the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Marakis. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to the consideration of items requiring separate discussion, Now, I've been notified by the clerk that we have a member of the public here for item 9. Is there an appetite by committee to move that item forward? Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Marakis. All those in favor of moving R9 forward? Opposed? That carries. So we'll begin with item R9. Would anyone like to move the staff recommendation? Moved by Mayor Daw. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions to this item? Seeing no comments, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move back to the regular order, which is R1. Would someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Kim. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Marakis. Comments or questions to item R1? Seeing none, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to item R2. Will someone move the staff recommendation? Anyone at all? Moved by Mayor Daw. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kim. Any comments or questions on R2? Mayor Daw has a comment. And then Michael Thompson. Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the CAO. There has been some changes in terms of the pricing on this project, and if you could quickly speak to that, I think we would appreciate the clarification.
And that's for Mr. Elliott?
For me.
Oh, for Mr. CAO. I was writing something down.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mayor Daw is correct. This report, when it originally came, identified 3 different costs over the 3-year period. And the question at the time was, why was there such an escalation in the costs? As all 3 were, I'm just looking for the point of reference here. The reference at the original report was that it was $335 in year 1 for a meter, $378 in year 2, and $442 in year 3. And the question put to staff was, on a sole source contract for a fixed price, why would there possibly be that kind of escalation? And it turns out that that information was incorrect. And in fact, those 3 prices were for 3 different sizes of water meter that we use. 90% of the water meters are for residential, or even maybe more than 90%. So that's the first price, the $335. But we do have provision for 2 other sizes of water meters for different size service connection sizes. And so the price is in fact fixed for the full 3 years. There's no escalation for American Exchange, which was also referenced at that meeting. So this clears that all up, and apologize for the error. We could have avoided it probably about I believe it was a 35 or 40 minute conversation that night. So with apologies from staff, this is the corrected information.
Mayor Daw?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I'll move to Councillor Thompson next, then Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. I certainly appreciate the clarification. You know, there was a lot of confusion that night about the pricing and how it was working. But in addition to that, there was also, questions raised by myself and others with regards to, the benefit of replacing these meters and trying to, determine the value in doing so. And I know in the report it speaks a little bit to it under the calculated savings column, where we're kind of identifying in rough numbers in terms of accuracy and using, I would assume, industry information to be able to calculate it. But I go back to some of the water reports we've had in the past because, from my thoughts, from what I've seen in the past, where we know what the gross usage is, and so I think that we should be able to somehow calculate to a better degree what that loss is, or what we're capturing as a result of replacing these meters little by little. Because, we know what the gross amount being used is, and we know what we're charging. And so in my mind, I think that year over year, as we're replacing more and more meters, we're getting better at capturing those dollars, those water usage numbers, and that delta, that variance should be shrinking a little by a little bit. And so in theory, that water loss number that we see with all of those budget reports on water and stuff should at least be trending in a more positive direction for us. And so, I appreciate using some of this industry information to be able to give us a sense of what the payback is, but I'm still looking for, actual metrics with regards to this program and some sort of indication that in doing this conversion, we're actually capturing that loss that's happened in the past. And so, through you to Mr. Nadarozny, how can we achieve that?
Mr. Nadarozny?
Through you, Mr. Chair, quite frankly, that would be really difficult to pinpoint to a really accurate number. As you saw in the budget numbers, the variation in the amount of water that we use varies hugely, a function of weather, and then also we're going through pretty rapid growth, so there's just a lot of new users coming on and more water going through the system. We could take an attempt to do it more, but it would still be theoretical, because unless you wanted to test the actual meters that you were taking out and show how inaccurate that meter was, and therefore the savings that the water that then goes through the new meter and how much is saved, unless you get that granular, you're really just doing more and more refined guesses, quite frankly, at what the savings are. The industry standard information we put in there should give council confidence that these meters should be replaced as they wear, because there's definitely a degrading of the meter over time. These meters would all be replaced anyway at some point, because at some point they'd actually fail, or we'd really start to see some anomalies in our usage with a more stable customer base. But so I'm not sure how to give you the sort of the precision that you're looking for. And I'd have to go back to see if I could find another community that's approached it differently and maybe learn from them.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. And I appreciate that. And listen, I know we're never going to get 100% accuracy, but I think the challenge is when we get these water reports, at least for myself, over the last number of years, that water loss number has typically, and off the top of my head, it's either been 6 or 8% year after year after year. And I think what I'm hoping to see is at least a trending in the right direction where that number is reduced. And I get it that water consumption fluctuates based on a number of different factors, but I got to think that loss percentage at least will have some sort of consistency, but unless you plot it, I don't know for a fact. But it's not just this program we do the lining of the sewer mains, and again, it's a question that just keeps coming up and up for me, is that somehow I'd like to have some confidence that the money that we're investing is making a difference with being able to capture some of that water loss. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'm going to move to Councillor Abel next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the main reasons we went for new meters last term was explained through water loss, and we were very concerned with the percentage. I think it was around 10%, and I think we should, or I would, I will ask staff, but I need a refresher to remember all the points that we figured were water loss, because it was significant. But it was leaking in pipes, so we're relining pipes, and there was loss we figured were at the water meters. And I think what Councillor Thompson's brought up is very good, because we're making this investment and we're moving forward, and it would be good to know if we're capturing some of that loss and what that loss was. So, and you spoke, Mr. CAO, to how you would have to do that, and I understand how that is. So I don't know if we're going to do that. But what I did want to bring up was that, Mr. Chair, every now and then we get residents saying, I got my water bill and it's $4,000. And our response is, well, the meters don't lie, so there's something in your house that is going on that is your responsibility. And sometimes I feel sorry for the resident, because if there is something wrong, is there something we can do to an alarm that we see? Well, wait a minute, this guy's water, it's kind of like the hydro when they're looking for grow ops, except it's sort of different. But there's alarming trends when there's excessive use of the utility, whether it be water or hydro, that we should trigger and say, there's something going on in your house, or maybe you're running a car wash or something, but you should know, because you're going to be responsible for that payment. So I'm just wondering, through you, Mr. Chair, if there's something we can do to handle those anomalies that occur in our meter systems. We always assume the meter is fine, But sometimes these people on limited incomes are strapped with a huge bill, and I do recall one was for $4,000. She got nothing was resolved at the town, so she went to the newspapers and the staff, and we appeared to be somewhat handcuffed, cold, and I would want to know if there's something a program or something we can do to cover that sort of a situation.
Mr. CAO?
Refer that question to, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll refer that question to Mr. Elliott, because I know there are some things that we do now, but I will say that I know there is more sophistication that we could bring to that to have it be more analytical as a result of just the billing going through. But in the interim, while we don't have those systems in place, there are some efforts that staff take, and I'll ask Mr. Elliott to speak to that.
Mr. Elliott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've actually got an ongoing situation now with a client that's received a substantive bill. The challenge is that we are only at the property once every 90 days, and as soon as we get that reading, it takes us a couple of days to collect all of those readings, and then when we're processing those, once we detect that there's a problem, we're ready to mail that bill. And so if we stop, we delay the bill, but there's not a whole lot that we can do at that juncture, but we do try to get a hold of that client, double check the read, and contact them to see and say, there's something going on in here, and you've got to do some homework. And so without a significant investment in the way we do our billing, whether it's more frequent billing, or whether in another couple of years with these new meters, as the population of these meters grows, we're going to be at a point where we can then implement an antenna-based radio reading system. And at that juncture, we have two-way communication with the meter at all times. We can then activate alarms on those meters that would beep to us that there's a problem. And so if the meter never stops, for example, in the middle of the night, it's still running, it would send an alarm to us and say, I got a problem, try to get a hold of our client. Unfortunately, the alarm is not a beeping sound in the home. It simply alerts us. And so that technology is there, but we're not at a point where we're ready to deploy that and make the investment, but it's in our books for 2019.
Councillor Abel?
That's great. That's exactly what I was sort of looking for, and I'm sure that would give everyone a bit of confidence in the system and water loss, billing, and looking after our customers. So that's sort of something's going on in the regular use. But it's not for 2019. So is there some way we can make some sort of, and I don't want to do this because I know it sets you up for all sorts of situations for people appealing, but could we, with all the savings and everything we're doing, not have some discrete way of looking after settling these things if they're isolated, if we know that it happens once a year sort of thing or twice a year, so that we are, until we get to that point, working in a compassionate way on certain circumstances, not every circumstance, but someone that leaves their hose running all day is different than someone that's unaware of a leaky toilet in the basement and lives alone and has no idea. So I'm just putting that out while we're talking about it, and just for compassionate reasons of our residents.
Are you looking for a response to that, Councillor Abel? Or is that a comment?
I wouldn't mind a response.
And Mr. Elliott, do your best.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to put it on the horizon for a report before the summer to look at some options that we could explore with council and how we might deploy those. In the interim, though, we do have a technology that once we detect that there's a high consumption, we immediately go out to that water meter and we can download the last 30 days of hourly readings from the meter itself, if it's one of our new smart meters. And at that point, we can then say, oh, that's interesting. For the first 10 days of that period, there was overnight consumption all night. And magically at 11 o'clock, between 11 and 12 on Saturday morning, it stopped. What happened during that period? And usually at that point, the client acknowledges that, yeah, that's when we realized that my water softener or my humidifier or my outdoor tap was running, and I shut it off. And so that technology is there now, but we have to go out to the home and download that information from the meter itself. And we only have a 30-day running history. But I'd be pleased to put it on my work plan to come back to council with something. It'll take some work with my group and the IES group to have some conversation about the options that we might be able to have to service our clients. But until then, we've been dealing with it. It's in private property. We have no control over your plumbing. It's your responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillor Abel, are you complete?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. I'm going to move to Councillor Humphreys for the first time, and then I'll move to Mayor Daw for a second. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. So I know what we're approving, so this is more of a report for clarification. There's lots of questions, but just in terms of the program itself on replacing the meters, I looked at the report a couple of times. Do we know where we're at? I know we were accelerating the program for 3 years to continue the implementation. I think there's 1,500 meters. Are we, what percentage are we there in terms of replacing the meters?
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, on the replacement program itself, we've been running for 2 full years, and we're just getting ready to launch our 3rd summer of changing approximately 1,000. This year, we're going to see if we can get upwards of 1,500, but there's some resource issues on getting these processed and up to speed. These are the new smarter meters that have that memory technology for the readings and the ability to radio read in the future. All of the new meters that have been going into 2C are these same meters. And so we're advancing fairly rapidly as the population is growing, our meter base, but it's still in the infancy. I think by 19 we'll be at a critical mass where we can deploy the antenna system that will require some costs, but then that will develop improved client service, improved monitoring, and some operational cost savings.
Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. It's awesome. And it looks like the plan's going to go on even after 2019 and we update and so on. One of the things it mentions in the report is that right now, I believe it's a 10 to 15%. Right now, the meters are in favor of the residents. So it looks like, in one way, we're doing this for more accurate reading, obviously. And is there any way, just back to Councillor Thompson's perspective, that we can work on seeing how we're doing year over year in terms of accuracy and billing? Is that a possibility, or is that just almost? I'm thinking almost 2 reports. One where they've got the old meters, and then we have the new meters. And we could start seeing how good we're doing. I think that's what we're looking for as well. I know it's a tough question. Don't worry about it for now, but something to think about in terms of, I'm just trying to, get to, is there any way that we can actually expedite this even further? What can we do to implement this program faster? I know it's obviously money related, but start thinking about how quickly we can get them in all the homes across Aurora. It's gonna make a huge difference, to your point, Mr. Elliott, in terms of having that communication back and forth. It's accurate. We don't have to send anyone to do meter readings anymore, and the accuracy of the water distribution. So charges. So I think for me, I think the program is vital. We need to do it. It's just I'm hoping to understand a little bit more of the efficiency that we're gaining on billing, and if we can in fact try to get this to end of jobs sooner than 2000. I think it says 2026 here. Is that my mistake, though? On page 3 of 9. I know 2019, I think we're going to be in a good position, but it looks here, it says here, with the current plan, change that will continue on an annual basis until 2026. It's quite a while. It's 9 years, hoping.
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the town has currently about 20,000 meters. And so they're all aging at different, they're not all 20 years old. Some of them we just put in yesterday. And so they don't need to be replaced yet. And so we're trying to catch up. We are behind because we first installed water meters in 1990-91, and now we're 2017. So we're 27 years in, and we've only been doing this for 2 years. We should have been started 10 years ago. And so we're trying to catch up to that critical point where maybe we're at an average, the oldest meters are only 15 years. And then we're just changing a few every year, and it's a maintenance program. It will continue forever.
Councillor Humphreys?
For me, it's just, I appreciate that. Thank you for the explanation. So just back to Councillor Thompson's suggestion, this is where we can get sort of how we're, improving the accuracy of the billing and capturing all the revenue, I think is good for us. Somehow we can come up with that kind of report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Move to Mayor Daw for a second time. Mayor Daw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I noticed that Lindsay Hayworth, our water supervisor, is in the audience. As I was working with Lindsay and Dan and Doug on a particular issue, and Lindsay's got this very nifty little ruler that he appropriated from the city of Barrie, I think, and it's got these pictures on it, the size of a hole and how much water loss that is, and I think a 1/16 of an inch hole, which is smaller than a piece of spaghetti. Incredible water loss, and it's so easy, whether it's your toilet that runs or you leave even a tap dripping. It's unbelievable how much water that can use. And so I appropriated the ruler from Lindsay and I took it over to communications, and they're working on something to go into the next water billing. So people, you can now start to appreciate how small a leak can have such a huge impact on your water bill. And it is, I mean, it's unfortunate. And one of the things that I think Councillor Abel referred to was your electricity bill. They can, that's how they define grow-ups. And I know we've got electricity bill at home that says, here's what we've used, here's our neighborhood average, and here's what our nearest neighbor has used. And it's because PowerStream, as Mr. Elliott mentioned, what we should have done, installed these meters, they're smart meters, years ago. And so they have that capability. I talked about Dan and Doug about this, is that if I'm out of country and I spend, I pull my American Express card out. Can we talk about what's in front of us? I am. If I pull my credit card out and use it, I will get a call that says you have an unusual spending habit. That's what we should be able to do with our water meters. It is, because it goes to the $502,500.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I have Councillor Maracas, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've talked a lot about the water meters and everything. Actually, the one thing that we didn't really bring up, our CEO kind of touched on it, and I can see Councillor Perry's getting ready to call a point of order, but we'll see how this goes. The fact that there was the mistake that was in the original report, it's back before us, and we as a council have to have confidence in the reports that come before us. And so, to me, that's a bit of an issue. And, I hope that it doesn't become a recurring thing. And maybe our CEO can kind of maybe give us a brief rundown on why that happened and maybe why it took so long for this report to come back to us.
Mr. Nanarajan, do you have any reassurances for the council?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair. So I ended up with this file, obviously, with the vacancy of the Director of Infrastructure. And so it wasn't till some time that I could actually get to delving into the report at the director level to get to the details. And so I initiated a review of that council meeting so that we had a good sense of all the questions that were raised by council at the time. And we just sort of went through those questions, and I already had the question. The one question I walked away with clearly that night was, how could this thing escalate as a function of U.S. dollars? So that part we were on to, but I wanted to make sure that we had the rest of the details and the rest of the questions answered to the best of our ability. And that's how long it took me to get that work done and to get it approved sort of as a director. So,
Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'm glad it was caught and it was brought to, you brought it to our attention, and we're able to have an actual discussion on how to move forward with this, and I'm quite happy moving forward and approving this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Maracas. Seeing no other speakers for this item, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to item R3. Someone want to move that item? Do I have a mover for that item? Moved by Councillor Kim. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Comments or questions to item 3, R3? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to item R4. Can I have someone to move R4? Moved by Councillor Maracas, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions to item R4? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Just to get some clarification, perhaps through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, when I look at page 2 of the report, it talks about some of the amendments and changes. Just on where it says Section 10 memberships, the addition of an equipment and weights membership. I'm not sure what that means. I'm familiar with Club Aurora, but what does it mean by an equipment and weights membership?
Mr. Downey.
Sorry. Thank you. With regards to those, if you're familiar with Club Aurora, we have a la carte packages. So this is an additional to that package, and it only allows access to the weight room and the equipment room. It doesn't include the pool and the aerobics room and all those other things.
Councillor Thompson?
And I guess sitting on Parks and Rec, I just want to have an understanding of why perhaps this didn't come to Parks and Rec for any comment or input. Through you to Mr. Downey, please.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, report's being brought forward mostly for administrative purposes. We actually had presented a fees bylaw to council, and unfortunately these fees were not included in that bylaw and should have been. So we are now adding them in so that we can begin charging these fees. We can't charge fees unless they're approved by council.
Councillor Thompson?
Sure, I just appreciate the rationale for the omission. Thanks.
All right, seeing no other speakers to this item, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to item R5. Mover and seconder for R5. Do we have a mover for R5? Moved by Mayor Dodd. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kim. Comments to R5? Seeing no comment. Oh, there we go. There it is. I had a feeling. Now they're coming in. Okay, so we have Councillor Maracas, Thompson, Abel, Kim. Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief and quick. Fundamentally, I have a problem with allowing a tax exempt for a business that's making a profit, and that has pretty much we've given a sweetheart lease deal to them on our land. So I'll leave it that brief and just say I'm not in favor of doing this. The one at the original sports dome, if there's a way that we can exempt them just for the 3.5 years that's left on their lease, so that way that 50,000 and change or whatever comes off of our operating budget, and the residents and the taxpayers save that money off the tax rate, well then I'm okay with that. But as long as we're not on the hook of saying that the tax exempt lasts longer than that 3.5 years. So if we do exempt them for those 3.5 years, once it's done and once the lease is done, can we renegotiate? And so I guess my question through you to Mr. Elliott, is that possible just to have a tax exemption just for a short period of time and then change it after?
Mr. Elliott? Go to Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the best way of dealing with this is we will do an amendment to the existing lease agreement, exempt them for taxes. That would run with the agreement, and the agreement expires September 30th, 2020. So this condition would expire with the lease.
And that's the condition on the sports dome?
Correct. I thought that's what we were specifically talking about. Okay.
Councillor Maracas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Downey. Yeah, so I mean, I could be persuaded to move in that direction, but I definitely am not in favor of allowing a tax exemption on the tennis bubble.
Thank you, Councillor Maracas. I have Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I mean, I have a similar concern about the tennis bubble, or the tennis center as it's being called now, and I want to understand, how this came about, because from my perspective, when I look at it, we sent this out to RFP, different corporations or entities bid on it, and it was always clear that they would pay the taxes. We entered into an agreement no longer than a year ago, and it stated that they would pay the taxes, and now it's before us again. So through you to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, can you just sort of help me understand, why this business is asking for tax exemption so early into our agreement?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the request for tax exempt, the request for tax exemption came from the operator themselves, and we've attached this letter at the back page of the report. They asked us to give some considerations to it. We had done some research as to whether or not this was even possible or not, which is one of the reasons that it's been taking so long, and because they did make the request back in September of 2016. It's certainly up to council to either consider this or not consider this. It's one of the reasons that you'll see that in the report that we've actually separated the two facilities, because we did anticipate that you may want to deal with one facility separate than another, so that there are recommendations that are specific to the sports dome, and there are recommendations specific to the tennis dome. This is not unlike a request coming from any other group. They've come forward to staff. Staff have prepared a report, done some research, and given the information to council, and it's now here for council consideration.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, I know it's still early and they probably haven't been assessed, but do we even have some sort of, ballpark figure of what we think the taxes will be for the tennis center?
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, but I would presume that they're very similar to the soccer dome, which is approximately 50,000 and change, 50,900 a year in 2016, 10.5 of which is our revenue. So the net savings to the town on that particular facility of doing this would be about 40, because we lose the 10 on the other side.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. So from my perspective, when we entered into this agreement, the essence was that we would receive, I think it's $9,000 a year in revenue from them, as well as the tax revenue. So based on what Mr. Elliott says, that was a specific number that we were counting on. Now the business has come forward and said they'd like a reduction. And as far as I can tell, that reduction only benefits the business itself. I don't see any enhancement or improvement in the services. So I'm hesitant. Well, I'm not hesitant. I'm not in favor of providing the tax break to the tennis center unless there was some change to the service levels or some benefit to the municipality, or perhaps some sort of compromise whereby the revenue that they were providing us is increased to offset the lost revenue from the taxes. So, I'm open to discussing the other one with regards to the soccer bubble, because I understand that, that there is a benefit to the community by reducing the operational costs in terms of the regional and educational tax we provide, but not for the tennis center.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. I have Councillor Abel, Kim, Humphreys, Meridaw, and Peary. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Usually in our reports we have a financial implication, and I don't see one here. Councillor Thompson broached on that by asking the question, how much money are we talking about? Page 3? There it is. One line. Okay. So, thank you very much. So on the executive summary on page 2, applying for tax exemption under the provisions, Mr. Chair, it says the act for the Maryland Redvers Tennis Center and the Aurora Sports Dome. Are we talking about both on this? I just want a little clarification why that is in the report. We're just talking about the one, are we not?
Are you talking about the total report?
Executive summary, it makes remarks about the Aurora Sport Dome.
It's both. The report talks to the sports dome and the tennis center, I believe.
Okay. So in the Aurora Sports Dome, would the town of Aurora be assuming operation of that?
Mr. Nadarozny?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, there's no change contemplated by this in terms of the current setup with the Sports Dome. This, in their investigation as a result of the request from the Tennis Center, we've established that either one could be declared by council to be a municipal capital facility. And so that allows for the possibility of council giving both or individually an exemption. And so recommendations 2, 3, and 4 are for the Tennis Center, and recommendations 5, 6, and 7 are essentially the same thing, but for the Sports Center. And just to allow an opportunity to clean up the Sports Center, because right now the town is actually paying taxes to the other levels of government for the Sports Center. So this allows us to consider one or both as a municipal capital facility and exempt the taxes.
Councillor Abel?
The town is... So the Sports Dome is a lease that we have an agreement with the same company, I believe, and we've been paying the portion of tax for the education and to the region. The town has assumed that and forgiven the tax that we're collecting. And that lease has been going on for a number of years, and it expires in a number of years. And could you just bring us up to status? What the status on that? How many years was the lease? We've been going on paying taxes for them, and how many years are left in that lease so we can perhaps renegotiate and correct that?
Mr. Downey?
To you, Mr. Chair, the lease was, I believe, for 15 years. I know it expires on September 30th, 2020, because I recently looked at the lease.
Councillor Abel?
About 3 years. And through you, Mr. Chair, what are our options at that time to do when that lease expires?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the town then has the opportunity to take over that facility and operate it as they see fit.
And which, in this case, would we be paying to the region and the education? Would we be paying those taxes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with regards to how the facility is left, that is the dome actually belongs to the owner, so they would take the dome away, but the artificial turf field would stay. Being able to operate it as an all-season facility, we would either have to assume or purchase the dome, or we would have to enter into another agreement with regards to an operator, the same operator, in order to leave the dome up. With regards to taxes, that is, if we can be exempt through this act, I believe that any operator of the facility could also be exempt, but I'll leave that up for a legal opinion. So we would see ourselves being exempt from taxes for the facility for the upcoming future. If, for instance, we then enter into a new operating agreement with a new vendor, or even the existing vendor, and we wanted to place in the lease that they paid all taxes, then we would not then exempt them, and the taxes would then be paid by them to the town, the region, and education. So those options are available to council upon the expiry of the agreement.
Councillor Abel?
So if I'm understanding, at the end of the lease, the operators to remove the dome, and then we would be left with an artificial turf, which is good for us to know, because down the road, I mean, we're just doing 2 artificial turfs right now as we talk. We're going to revamp the Shepherd's Bush, and we're going to provide one for the soccer club, and we have one that we have in with Max, and in 3 years we'll have another one sitting right there for us in the center of town. So at that time, if he removes the dome, we will be able to use that for our organizations, and we won't be paying taxes, and we'll be able to operate it like we do all our other facilities. So we're really in a great position, because we will stop paying tens of thousands of dollars a year. If he doesn't remove the dome, then we'll remove it and he has to pay us for it. It's one or the other. Or there could be some agreement, and I think one of those agreements could be for $1, we could purchase it off him and operate it ourselves. So that's an option that we have coming, and I just want to get some sort of clarity on that. The tennis facility, we are giving them a lease agreement, and I believe, and I don't know the details, but Mr. Chair, are we allowed to ask what those lease agreement terms were? Because I heard Mr. Thompson, how many years is it and what are they paying?
Mr. Downing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. Those conditions of lease are part of the public record. The lease is for 20 years. I believe they are paying $9,000, but I could stand to be corrected on that. I don't have the lease in front of me on an annual basis.
So the operation of that is less than $1,000 a month, and I don't know what we have in Aurora, but I think if we're thinking of $20 a square foot is a pretty low price. I know that some on Yonge pay $40 a square foot. What does that work out to a square foot? Or would I give you a week to figure that out? My math isn't that good.
Mr. Downing, do you have that information?
Through you, I don't have the square footage off the top of my head. It's a calculation that I can certainly provide. However, on top of that, you would also need to look at the capital expenditures that have been put out by the vendor. They have paid all capital costs with regards to the installation of that dome, although it is on town property. But I can give you I can calculate a square footage and cross-reference that with the lease to give you a cost per square foot on a lease.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you very much. And I think it's valuable knowing that, because any business that sets up in Aurora pays the capital costs and pays for their land. But I was just sort of getting, and I want to get an idea that we have accommodated them for a long-term sustainable lease that affords them a minimal payment for the property, and they have now come forward, or this report is coming forward, to ask for an exemption of taxes. So the exemption of taxes in this situation would not be the same as what is going on at the Dome, where we are not collecting any taxes, but we are paying the region in the education tax. Through you, Mr. Is that correct? And so we're only out of pocket some $10,000 if we could use the Dome as a similar model. All right, and perhaps by next time at council, I'll have a little more time to review this with staff. So I have a little. I'm not asking as many questions, but there are. I just don't know why we would, if he was building a business model and told us that if you give me this lease, then I can run this operation, and now we're back to him saying, now I need some more relief. And without any business or anything before us to show that there's a loss or anything else, so I can only assume it's going to add to his profit otherwise. And so I'm not in favor of moving this, and I think the reasons I'm not in favor are just that we have to be very careful in these agreements that we make, because they can have long-term implications, and we saw that with the Sports Dome, where we were paying out some $40,000 a year over the duration of the lease. And I don't want to get in the situation here. I think a fixed lease rate at 20 years is unheard of as far as leasing property. And if I were to talk to real estate people, they might say the same. I think we can do better than this for our community. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in agreement with everyone who've spoken. I would state that based on the definition of a municipal capital facility, that this facility may not even qualify under that definition. I mean, this facility is no different than the Sky Dome or the Rogers Center, in that the public uses the facility and the leasee or the owner capitalize on the public's entertainment value. When I was reading this, I was thinking, how is giving a tax exemption beneficial to users. And as was stated earlier, unless there's some kind of trickle down on the tax savings to the owner, to the users, I don't see any benefits to allowing them this tax exemption. And just reading that the last couple of sentences on page 2, where it says the operators of the tennis bubble have agreed to pay all taxes as a condition of the lease agreement with the town. They have now submitted a request for a tax exemption for the facility, as it may qualify as a municipal capital facility under the Act. I think when you go into a business arrangement, you know all your numbers, you do your due diligence, and you understand what your profit scenario is, and you stick with that. Whether they miscalculated or they're trying to take advantage of a clause or some exemption that was brought forward just by chance, I don't like that scenario, and so for those reasons, I can't support the exemption. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the sports dome. But for the tennis dome, I am against giving the exemption.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lots of my questions have been answered. I'd just like to ask staff, the whole report is basically in support of allowing this tax exempt. And I guess would like to ask staff, why they feel strongly that this is the way to go. It looked like we were on one route when we first got together with this group, and they've decided to run a business. Now we're saying can be declared as a municipal capital facility for the purpose of municipality and public use. And are we going to have engagement here? Are we going to be setting up fees? Are we going to be getting revenue from this business? Is that why we feel that it's worthy of the exemption? I know the dome sports dome is a done deal, but just wondering about the, why now do we feel this is, if I could ask staff that question? Just in terms of what their thought process was, that this is something that is the right thing to do.
Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The two we're looking at somewhat differently. From the soccer dome perspective or the sports dome perspective, I believe it makes financial sense for the town to waive those fees and give them tax exempt status, so that there's going to be a net savings to the taxpayer of Aurora. With regards to the tennis dome. The request came to us from the vendor. There's a couple of ways that information can come to council. We could have asked the vendor to come forward with a delegation, and a staff report could have been prepared after that delegation. We felt that if the request came, we were going to present it to council, give you all the information with regards to that. There is no financial benefit to the town with regards to giving or waiving the taxes or giving tax exempt status, on the tennis dome. There is always an opportunity to negotiate with the vendor if we choose. As I think Councillor Thompson said, perhaps we look at a different fee schedule if this tax exempt status is given, but that would only occur if council feels that this is something that you want to entertain. Like I say, one of the reasons that we had presented the report as it is so that you could separate the two facilities and deal with them individually.
Councillor Humphreys. Move to Mayor Daw, Councillor Peary, and Councillor Marax for a second time. Mayor Daw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to see these two items split into two separate reports, because we're really dealing with two distinct issues here. One being the sports dome, which is a long outstanding burr under our saddle, and the other is relatively new. And I appreciate the financial implication that, as the CAO said, there's no assessed value on the unit yet, but I think that we could have at least had some kind of guesstimate as what that would be. We should be able to come up with some kind of ballpark at least as to what that would be. So I can't support that until I at least have some sense of what we would be foregoing or what would be the alternative to that. So I don't know, Mr. CAO, if it's possible to split these, and maybe we just send it back to staff to come back to the next cycle and deal with them as two separate issues, because I think that would be the most appropriate thing to do.
Procedurally, would we have to make an amendment to that effect?
It would just be to defer back to staff, refer back to staff.
With those instructions?
To split that up and to deal with them as two separate issues.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Mayor Dodd, do you mind if we go to
No,
Councilor
not at all.
Pirie and then Councilor Marcus for a second time and then go back to you? Councilor Pirie?
So thank you. My question is actually for Pat, sort of relating to Mayor Dodd's comment, because I thought the same thing. But because we're dealing with two facilities that are truly very similar in their function and what they do, if we were to deem one of them as a municipal capital facility and not the other, only because it would be to our benefit as a municipality, and that's the reason that we're doing it and we're not doing it to the other, because it could cost us money. My question is, are we ever liable to face a claim that we acted in bad faith?
Ms. Desario?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't think we would be liable. I think the reason why it was just in one report is just to make it easier for council. But if you separate it and if you agree that one's a municipal capital facility but you don't declare the other, there's nothing about acting in bad faith, because the two are different from what I'm hearing.
Councilor Pirie?
And I think it's always important that we're willing to play devil's advocate to make sure that we're making the best decision possible. And I think it could be very easily argued that the facilities themselves serve pretty much the same role, except we're stuck paying the taxes on one of them on the proponent's behalf or on the owner's behalf, and the other we wouldn't be. I guess the only way I would be able to support moving forward in this direction with the newer facility is with some very strong regulation placed on the owner of the bubble, the owner and the operator. So I would want to see fees capped. I would want to see different things put in place to ensure that the facility is there's an offset taking place between what the proponent would be saving and what our residents would be saving, so that, you know, at the end of the day, it's a wash. And I think you could easily argue that it would be to the benefit of Aurora residents. But as it stands right now, I can't support one. Ms. Desario has definitely made me feel more comfortable about supporting the other. So at this point in time, I think that's all I wanted to add, but I thought it was important to ask those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pirie. Before I go around for a second time, my comments are similar with respect to the tennis center as opposed to the sports dome. We have a number of speakers for the second time. We have Councillor Marcus, Councillor Abel, Councillor Thompson. Mayor Daw was suggesting a referral. If you have something to add to the motion as it is, or his idea was to refer it back to staff and then having it coming back as two reports. But Councillor Marcus, you were first on the speakers list, so Mayor Daw has not made that motion as of now. So if there's anything else you'd like to add, now would be the time to do it.
Mr. Chair, I was going to just elaborate a little bit more in depth of what my point was already, but I mean, I'm fine with giving up my time and referring this, so that's fine. Okay.
Councillor Abel and Thompson. Councillor Abel?
Just briefly, if we're going to refer back, there was a comment there's a net savings to the taxpayers, so I'd like to try and understand how that comment comes. And under financial implications, it says a tax exempt for the sports dome. I'd like to know what the financial implications are for the tennis dome as well. So I think that's all I would add.
Right. I think that the net effect was we save about 50 Gs paying the taxes, not paying the taxes for the dome, versus the 10 grand we get back in we wouldn't be getting back in taxes from the tennis center. So we wouldn't be paying the 50 grand in taxes. Net 40, as I'm saying, 50 minus 10.
Say that again.
Mr. Natarozny, perhaps you can do it more succinctly.
Oh, that's a stretch. So my comment is, after 3 years, that sports dome is gone. So then the financial implication is we're not getting taxes from the tennis. So there's a financial implication there. I'd like to know what that is at that time. But for the 3 years now, I can see, all right, it should be more than one line. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Thompson?
Just briefly, I support the referral to staff, but perhaps I can also include a comment from the region. I mean, here we're discussing for the most part, the impact of the town of Aurora, but, if you were to make it a municipal capital facility, you're also foregoing the regional taxes. And I don't know if there's been any conversation or at least any notice provided to the region that we're having this, but, perhaps our regional representative could also take that up.
And I'll go to Mayor Daw now because he's going to make a motion on this. Mayor Daw?
Sorry. Yes. So it would be to refer this back to staff to split it into two reports and take into account all the various comments from that we've heard at council to bring back two more complete reports.
And this is for next cycle?
I'm not sure if that's feasible.
As soon as possible?
I would.
Mr. Downey, do you have a comment on the timing, perhaps?
To you, Mr. Chair, the information is available on the Sports Dome, so if we are separating the report, I'll bring that report back right away. And when the information becomes available through Impact and we have the assessment on the tennis dome, when that information becomes available, then we'll bring a report forward on that. So I don't see both reports coming back on the same cycle.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the referral? Seconded by Councilor Marakis. All those in favor of the referral? Opposed? That carries. Okay, move to item R6. Do I have someone to put that motion on the table? Moved by Mayor Dodd. Do I have a seconder? Seconder for R6? Seconded by Councillor Kim. Any comments to R6? Seeing no comments to R6, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to R7. Someone put that on the table? R7. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Marakis. Comments or questions to R7? Seeing none, I'll call the... Oh, Councillor Abel has a comment. Councillor Abel.
Thank you. We had done... I think it was the leisure complex. We had done the chillers on the leisure complex. You know what? I'll save this for... I'll contact the director during the week before council.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Abel. Any further comments to this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote to R7. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to R8. Is there someone who will move the staff recommendation? I moved by Councillor Thompson. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Peary. I have Councillor Thompson, Abel on comments for R8. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I know a few of us, as we've attended those conferences in the past, we've certainly are familiar with the LED program and LAS and have seen presentations on recreational facilities and understand the value in doing so. But I just there's a comment within the executive summary that talks about the lighting having a 5 to 3 year payback in energy efficiency, but yet I don't really see any details within the report. So perhaps through you to Mr. Natarozny, is it possible for us to get a little bit more detail on that payback information? Because if the total cost of this project is $440,000 roughly, a 3 to 5 year payback means that we're going to have a savings of $90,000 to $150,000, and so it sounds wonderful. I think the comment would be, geez, we should have done this sooner. But I'd like to get those kind of details, if possible, for next week's meeting.
Mr. Natarozny, do you have a comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's absolutely possible. I did have the question raised earlier before the meeting, and just to give a sense of that those numbers, where those numbers come from, to take one of the arena pads at the SARC, for example, the cost to replace that lighting is about $72,000. That's the capital cost to the cost of the equipment and installation is roughly $72,000, and that would be eligible for a grant. So $5,800 would come off of that price right away because of the municipality buying that equipment. And so that gets factored into the cost, the payback period. The current electrical cost for those same lights is about $25,000 a year, and I'm really rounding the numbers here. I'll provide more detail before council next week. But the electrical cost right now to run the lighting in that particular arena is about $25,000, and the estimated cost avoidance of once these lights are installed is roughly $15,000 a year. So when you get those kinds of paybacks, that's why the payback period is so short. But we will certainly provide a chart for all, I believe it's 7 different rooms in essence, and we'll provide that kind of data for all 7, and we'll have that to you for the next council meeting.
Thank you, and I appreciate it. And I know myself and others, we've gone back to some of the other retrofits or alterations that we've made where we've made those claims, and we want to see that the savings are being realized. I know that utilities always comes up during the budget process, and so, with what we've done with the street lighting and now with the recreational lighting, hopefully it now starts being reduced in our budget and we can see some actual savings. So I look forward to the information.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I for some reason, I thought when we did the LEDs for all the streetlights that we were LED compliant or were done. So my question, and I fully endorse going this way for long-range strategy for all the right reasons, because our energy consumption goes down and obviously that lessens the tax burden. But do we have any other sort of areas, facilities or something that we're going to have to do as well on these LED conversions?
Mr. Natarajan, do we have anything else for LED conversions coming down the pipe?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have to get back to council with the details on that, but I would think this would cover most of our large uses. Probably there's areas of this building and so on that are still on not on LED lights, so there's opportunities for further conversions, but I would think this would be the last of the big projects.
Councillor Abel?
My thought, Mr. Chair, is that we should, if we could see those, fire stations, library, cultural center, if we kind of saw these all on the horizon, I think it would just help council as we go down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this is the 3rd report where I've read the words single source contracting. And I know that with the chillers in the previous item, timing was an issue, and then certainly timing is one of the considerations when we do, or any municipality does single source contracting. What's the rationale here, other than the fact that it is LAS, and we know the relationships that LAS has with the various regions? Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. CAO, what's the reason here for the single sourcing?
Doug?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might ask Mr. Elliott if he has anything to add on this from a procurement perspective, but my understanding is that the competitive procurement was done by LAS, and so we're sole sourcing to LAS, but they did a competitive process. So I don't know, Mr. Elliott, have you got anything to add from that from a procurement perspective?
Dan?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, LAS did a competitive bid process to find both the equipment supplier, the lighting supplier, and the project manager contractor. We're essentially piggybacking on that process that they did. So the process that they used meets the requirements of our procurement bylaw, but the technicality is that we're coming to council and saying award to them without ourselves doing a competitive bid. And so it's a single source. Does that help your
Councillor Kim?
help with your
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. I find that I think some years ago when municipalities were working on their own to procure large-scale contracts. I think there was a lot of benefits to LAS, but I'm finding, when you talk to other municipalities and other regions, I'm hearing that they're not as beneficial now. I'm sure they're doing great work, but they're not as beneficial now compared to compared to the value that they proposed many years ago. And through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. CAO or Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher.
He's not here
sorry.
tonight.
Mr. Elliott. My understanding is that LAS, Mr. Fletcher, LAS, they are broadening out into other industries and other products and services. Should they do go out to expand their horizons, are we committed to using LAS in other areas, or will that be coming back to council for a regular, they'd just be another contractor amongst many?
Mr. Elliott? That is your name, is it?
I believe so. I'm getting a little confused now. Through you, Mr. Chair, this is very specific. It's 7 rooms, LED lighting change out through this process. And if we were going to use LAS for anything else, we would be coming back here.
Single source.
Well, it depends on what the proposal is. LAS has got different services. They try to buy natural gas, electricity. They've got a number of different municipal programs. And their challenge is that they're not a consumer themselves, but they let these contracts out and say, we might have some municipalities interested in doing this. What kind of price would you give us as a group? But then we're not compelled to participate with them because they can't bind the town. We have to make the decision ourselves.
Councillor Kim? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Kim. Any further comments for this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to item R10. Someone move R10. This is an additional item. Anyone at all? John, Councillor Abel to move R10. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Mayor Daw. Comments to this item? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. That ends the items for this evening. We'll move past notices of motion to new business. I'll begin with Councillor Peary.
Thank you. Mr. Nadarozny, wondering if you could please look into whether or not we are currently members with Firemark. It's an interesting organization. And if we are not, maybe just a report back to council outlining what they do. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Peary. Councillor Kim, new business? No? Mayor Daw, no? Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Earlier this evening, we had a resident come forward to talk about sort of a very unique situation in front of his home and 2 others to the north of him on Machel Avenue. And it's quite unique. We had great support from staff. Councillor Maracas joined me out to visit. And so these homes, I think it's probably the only ones in Aurora built this way. They originally had a driveway, but the grade is absolutely lower. So we went out to visit, and because of the way the streets, over the years, these are really older homes, the grade level is so high that they can't have, there's no parking available. So the only parking they have for themselves is directly in front of their home. It wasn't a big deal because they were able to park when it was the Sobeys and the other store that came about. And then when it sold, and now we've got Treasure Hill building those new those homes, they have some real struggles parking, and sometimes, depending on what is happening during the day, they're parking at the end of the street and so on. So I was wondering if it's appropriate at this point. And one of the issues we have is that the town believes that we should be charging them for parking, permit parking. But it's such a unique situation that I feel that really we should just grant them the parking in front of their homes as part of their living space. And I'd like to move a motion forward to allow permit parking for these 3 residents. I don't know if I have a seconder on that, and if that's appropriate to do at this point.
Councilor Maracus, you have your hand up. I don't mean.
Maybe Councilor Maracus can add.
If you're thinking about seconding, Councilor Maracus.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, to interrupt, and Councilor Humphreys. They're already allowed to. There's already a permit there. I think maybe what we're looking for is just to waive the fees for those two permits, and I think that's a better way because they're already allowed to get a permit. We erected the signs, so I think we're just looking at waiving the fees for them because, as the gentleman mentioned, if he wanted to, he could park just on the other side of the sign, and it's free. So it's kind of weird that he has to pay $200 to park in front of his house. So it's a bit silly. So I think maybe what we're looking for is to waive the fee.
I guess my only comment is, obviously before this is moved, is that typically, we'd like to address this with information around it. And so if it's possible perhaps to bring this forward as a notice of motion, or I don't know if it's possible to get staff to move on it quicker than that, but we get in trouble when we make motions in new business and then we don't know what the implications are going to be. So, I mean, I'm happy to, you can move it if you'd like. It's not really part of new business. New business is more, it's less substantive motions and more simple direction to staff. So, Councillor Humphreys?
Okay, yes. Sorry. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I was contemplating a motion for a while there, but I just thought because it's such a unique situation, it's really these homes, it's just parking. The signs are already there, and it says for parking for these 3 homes.
Right.
So really, they shouldn't have anyone parking there anyway. So it's just a very unique situation. I mean, if I can get some guidance from staff, how you would prefer. I certainly don't want to put anyone in an awkward situation. I don't want to have people feel like they're forced to vote a certain way. But I guess I've been engaged in it for quite some time, along with Councilor Maracus. Apologies. I just like it to go well.
I think Doug would like to chime in.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this situation was brought to my attention some weeks ago, actually, and we were at first looking to see if there was any sort of administrative way to just kind of see what flexibility we have. We are currently of the opinion that it would require a motion of council because, there's a permit. We have other areas in Town Park that have permits for parking, and there's a number of people that have been concerned about that process. So we think it's in the best interest that we bring a report to council with all of the information, and we can put the recommendation in there or ask for council's approval at that time once they have the information. So we'd be prepared to do that on the next cycle. It's not a problem. The wheels were already in motion to do that.
Councillor Humphreys? Report for next cycle is what Doug said.
I guess next cycle. I would love to be able to do it this evening because what I'm concerned with is going to get tied into other permit parking that absolutely have no relation to this situation. It's very, very unique, and I don't know. We're there. Everything's set up except for that piece. So, I don't know, can my seconder contribute? What are your thoughts on this? Or anyone else around the table? Can we discuss it? Or do I make a decision?
I think,
I don't want it to go wrong. Let's put it this way.
I just think we can go round and round in new business, and
Okay, I'll bring it back as a motion.
It's not. Pardon me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming you're okay, Sandra, then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Is that it for new business then, Sandra?
Yes,
thank
you.
Sorry, Councilor Humphreys?
Yes, that's okay. Sandra's fine.
It's not even that late. Okay, Councilor Abel?
Thank you. I just wanted to say on Councilor Humphreys that if there's something in the planning that the town was responsible for allowing a house to be built without a driveway, that's pertinent information in my decision making. So if that's what all I would want is from our town to say, this is it. I know the residents supplied it. I'd just like it to be put in. Absolutely. From what the history I understand, if there is an exception to anything, this is it. These three people. So I am definitely on the same wavelength. I would just like a little background information. Thank you. And I have no new business.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Thompson?
If I may, I'd just like to get a couple of updates. One through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, about a week ago, we received some complaints with regards to dust around State Farm, and I know that you were going to speak with them, but we also had a little bit of a snowstorm, which helped address the issue, but now that the weather's changing again, can you provide some sort of update with regards to the issue and what remediations happened?
There we go, Marco. You're on now.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I've been in contact with the landowner. He's aware of our concerns, and we've scheduled a meeting, and they're going to do their best to sort of mitigate that in the future. Of course, we had some unusual circumstances last week with very gusty winds, and it is a large area. They weren't able to send out their water trucks because it was just too cold, but they were aware of our concerns, and we are meeting with them, I think, this coming week, moving forward to hopefully to mitigate that type of issue arising again. But there were unusual circumstances with the gusty weather.
Thank you. And the other one, just really, we're fortunate enough last week to have Premier Wynne in town, and I was just perhaps through you to the mayor. Any chance she brought some checks with her for some grants or anything? No, okay, I was just checking.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Marakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going through Town of Newmarket's agenda from last night, and I think it's important for us sometimes to know what's going on in our neighboring municipalities. And the one thing that caught my eye, and I think that I think it should catch all of our eyes, is they have an application in front of them for an official plan amendment for 16200 and 16250 Yonge Street. And if anyone's familiar with that, that is the land that is just north of St. John's on and Yonge on the west side, and it's actually the same owner that owns the land at the corner of Yonge and St. John's now in our municipality. And so they have put forward an application to look to develop that, and I think that there's some implications in what they're doing there that could affect our municipality and that piece of property. So I think it might be something that maybe Mr. Ramuno could bring us a report and letting us know on how this is being handled in Newmarket and what the developer is looking to do, because within the report it actually states that they're looking to do the Newmarket section first, and then they're going to be looking to develop our section after. And so, there is some things within the report that I think are a little bit concerning and a little bit alarming. I'll just give you one set. To me, like one thing that stands out is they're looking to redesignate a woodlot within the plan from natural heritage to emerging residential. And it states that it's been reviewed by LSRCA, who have provided no objection to the proposal. I'm wondering maybe, our chair of Lake Simcoe could maybe give us a report also to why there was no objection to that change in that amendment. So I think that's important, because I think that could have some serious implications into the development within our municipality. So,
Mr. Ramuno, you got that? Is that something you can bring back? Is that it, Councillor Marakis?
Well, actually, yeah, I got one more. I'll throw in one more. Why not?
Why not?
Why not? A couple meetings ago, I asked about where within our procedural bylaw and when did we actually okay the change to when we move into open session from closed session to stay in the room instead of coming out into the chamber, which we normally have done over, years. And so I'm just, it was pointed out that it was a procedural bylaw change, and I'm just wondering, I've gone through the procedural bylaw and I haven't found it anywhere in there where we actually made that change. So I was wondering if anyone could point that out to me.
To the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's actually not written in the procedural bylaw. However, it has been our practice to, open and close closed session in the room that is advertised through the agenda, which has been the Lexon room and the Holland room for the past few closed session meetings we've had.
Councilor Marcus?
Thank you. And so I guess that just, to me, that when was that decision made? Who authorized it? Because to me, council should be the authority that makes that decision on if we're going to make a change like that. Was the media notified of this change? Were residents notified that we'll be doing this instead of coming into the chamber? Are we going to be telling our residents and the media to stand outside the door and wait and knock on it and wait and ask when are we going to open the door so they can come into the open session? I just think, especially since we made the change to start closed session at the beginning, so before we start council meetings, I don't see the harm in us just walking into the chamber for open session, which we've done for, as I said, since I can remember. When we come in here, it's recorded. The public has an opportunity to sit here and see. I think that because we didn't notify the public, I think it's a bit of an issue.
Thank you, Councilor Marcus. I'm going to go to Doug, although I'm just looking at our calendar that's online. It does say that the council closed session will be the Holland room, so it is listed there. I appreciate your comments, and Doug has a comment to your comment.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can delve deeper into the details if you want about how the change came about. But in essence, one of the fundamental changes is that the closed session isn't part of the council agenda anymore. It's a separate meeting, so that the decisions made by council at that time don't have to be brought back to another council meeting or don't have to be ratified at a future date. We were into a mix of having separate meetings, and some were an extension of regular meetings, and so we thought in order to give us more opportunity to handle closed session items in the same measured way and the same sort of paced way that we do our regular agendas, that we would schedule a closed separate session before every council meeting, and then if we didn't have anything, it's easier to cancel those and say we don't have any closed items. But those are standalone meetings before, whereas before they were part of the regular meeting, which is why you went into closed from within this chamber, and you came back to finish your meeting. So maybe we haven't made that change, clear to the public, but that's in essence what's happening is a separate meeting is happening before this meeting. And so as long as we advertise where that meeting is, and as long as we start the meeting in open, which we do, and as long as we end the meeting by going back in open, which we do, then we have met all of the qualifications. The only other thing you might add, and it would just add some time, and some of those meetings are already kind of pressed for time as it is, you'd have to start here at 5:45, and the only thing you would do is move to closed, because that's the whole meeting. Then you'd all pick up from here, go into the closed session, and then again, you'd come back up here just to close it. But it would still be just that meeting. It wouldn't be an extension of another meeting. And I'll just look to the clerk to make sure I've got that pretty much. Yeah, thank you.
And I appreciate that, and I'm not at all insinuating that we are doing anything undoing or anything wrong by staying in there. We are in open session. We are opening the doors. I just think, as you stated, that Mr. Natarazi, that the because it is a separate meeting and it's a standalone meeting, and we are making final decisions, and they don't need to be ratified. To me, it's important that we come back here. I think this is the chamber. This is where we make our final decisions, and I just think it's important that we do that here. Because any decision that's going to be ratified and the council is making that decision, I believe it needs to be done in this chamber. And that's my opinion, and maybe not everyone shares it, but that's the way I feel. And I think that a lot of the public feels the same way. So I thought I would point that out, and I think that if we are going to make that change, it needs to properly be done in the procedural bylaw, and I think that council as a whole, as a majority, needs to agree to that change. I don't think it should have been done without council authorizing it.
Thank you, Councilor Marcus. We do not have closed session tonight, so I'll move to adjournment. Mover, Councilor Perry, seconded by Councilor Marcus. All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Why is it my fault?